All right, so let's continue. We now are able to create websites for a particular developer, right? And establish a relationship between these two entities, right? These two instances. Um, Certainly, um, we could also implement all the other operations such as update. But I like to focus on yet another one that specifically handles a relationship between these two, which is removing. Right, I want to be able to remove a website, right, and which also needs to be able to update. Not only remove the particular website, but also needs to be able to update the original array, right, of the objects of the website that has been removed, because we have because the relationship is two-way, right? Not only do we have the user referencing the child, but also the children, right, referencing the parent, right? So if I remove any of the children, I also need to update the array for that parent. Okay, so let's work on that. So first of all, we'll implement just removing the website all by itself. Okay, just focus on that. In particular, because we have the first two, Star Trek and Facebook, not listed as children of Poe. Okay, so we'll remove those two all by themselves, right, without actually having to update Poe relationship. All right, so let's focus on removing these two first. Okay, so let's again, let's start from the top. We'll we have the website service. We have the delete a website. We don't have it. Let's implement it. We'll need the ID of the website that we are removing, and also we'll need the user whose parent it is, right? So, and will be a delete. So this will be a delete. Actually, I don't think we implemented that from the browser. Did we do that? I don't believe we did that, right? So if we really want to do it from a top down, right? The right place to start is way up in the HTML. Yes. So let's go back in the HTML and see what that looks like. So if I go into a particular website, notice that there's a delete button. So okay, we have the button, but let's probably that's not even tied to a controller. So let's do that. Let's close everything, and let's start at the beginning. Let's see. We have a public assignment, views, website, and we have the template edit, where we have the edit button. And here's the edit button, and it allows us to delete. Here's when we call the delete, and we pass in the website object that we want to remove. Presumably, it has the ID of the website that we are removing. Notice that before we can delete, notice that the retrieval is not working, and that's probably because it's implemented by retrieving the website from that array, right? We'll probably need to implement that first. Let's do that first. Let's see, that comes from where? That comes probably from the controller of the editor, right? Right here. There it is, the find websites for user. We're passing the user ID. That probably goes into the service to retrieve this. That's in, let's see, that's in the service, the website service. Retrieve the websites for user, website by ID. There it is. And it's doing API user ID goes all the way to the website service over here, and it's this one right here, right? Find website by ID, which is implemented here to use the array, right, which we want to do away with, correct? So let's instead of doing this, the next step would be to go into the user model. To the website model. It will be something like website model, find website by ID. and we'll pass as arguments the ID of the website that we want. And this, presumably, it'll go out to a database and we'll come back with a promise, and hopefully at some point the actual website document ready for us to send it back as a JSON object. Yes? Right? And we're not going to use this. If there was an error and we couldn't find that website, we're going to respond with a 404. Just like we didn't find a website, we don't find or a page, we didn't find a resource. Okay, plus maybe send the actual error from the database. All right, so we don't have this. Let's go into the data model to implement it. For the website, it's in here. Okay, let's implement that. Website model.find by ID, and that's a trivial one, right? We just say find this, and we have the website ID, and we'll just return website model.find by ID, website ID. So notice, again, this is an API that translates a higher level call that knows about IDs, objects, and whatnot, converting it into a raw, low-level call, right, that knows about MongoDB. Yes? Right? And this is very, very important in the architecture. Okay, this is what they pay the architectures big money, right, to come up with things with ideas like this, right? This isolates the rest of the application, right, from the low-level implementation, right? This makes the code much easier to modify. Tomorrow, if tomorrow they decide that we don't want to use Mongoose anymore, they can very easily come in and update this line to use instead Postgre or MySQL or whatever. Yes, but everybody else upstream is isolated from these changes, right? Because they're using this high-level model, right, of a representation of the data. They don't care, right, how actually we are storing this, right? It would be a bad practice to instead of doing this find website by ID, I could have done this, right? I could have brought the website. Anybody can load the website model, yes? It would have been bad practice to do this instead. Var website model require. Actually, we did it already, right? I have the website model. It would have been a bad practice to having done this instead. Right. Find by ID. I have find by ID right here because this is specific to Mongoose, right? Okay, so if everywhere I need access to a website or a user, I use a specific vendor, right? And data access wherever I want and spread it across all my code, it makes it a nightmare to come back later, right, and refactor this, right? It would make it very, very expensive later to migrate this to any other. It would be tied to the vendor. Yes? Right, so Mongo would have us for the rest of their lives. Yes?
Some other parts of the assignment, we created an API object with the functions, but in this we're just adding on these functions to the model object.
Yeah, they're equivalent. Yeah, they're equivalent. Yeah, in that implementation, we're using kind of like a factory pattern, right? Where we create an object, we populate, right? Here, we're adding it to the instance that we are exporting. It's equivalent. I like this implementation a little better. In that implementation, you need it inside of a function, I believe, isn't it? You export a function that takes as argument.
I tried it and I don't think I did that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. This implementation allows you to require the model anywhere you want. So it's a singleton, whereas that one, every time you require it instantiates a brand new one, and you can't because this has to be required only once. So this one is more nimble, more useful. Yeah, this implementation. Anyway, that's why APIs are very important. Okay. Anyway, so there's find by ID. Let me restart the server. We changed that, and if we come here and refresh, notice that now we have start track. Right, that works. Right, we are able to retrieve it from the database. Okay, fine. Now we can go and actually implement the delete. Right, so let's work on the delete next.